Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this Q&A with Director Jay Burleson. My name is Tom Bocci, and man, I'd love to welcome you, Jay. And the first thing I got to ask is, most people, it's hard enough doing one movie, and you're over here busting out two. It's like, all right, okay, Mr.
Yeah,
Overachiever. So,
it's pretty crazy how it all came together because we started part 5 in 2019 and we made part 5 first. And we had been trying to get a much more ambitious film off the ground for like 2 years. And we kind of set the fall of 2019 as like, we're doing it. And we had some money committed, but it wasn't nearly enough to do what we were trying to do, which was more like this art house slasher film. And when we kind of realized that wasn't happening, myself, my DP, Chris Hillicky, we were already living in Athens, Alabama, in like a month-to-month apartment where our producer, Frank Crafts, already lived, and just kind of decided as a group, including our producer, Ian Cunningham, that we're going to make a movie. And the third Saturday in October, part 5 kind of presented itself as the easiest thing that we could make, considering we were really putting it together at a rapid pace, because we've been prepping something completely different. And now we're just going to turn the page and make a movie. And I'd had the idea for years of trying to start up some type of old school slasher franchise that would be pretty much like making period piece films from the 70s, 80s, and 90s and kind of recapturing different vibes from the slasher heyday. And so part 5 seemed like the best one to start with in that sense, because we knew we were limited in what we could do and that there were going to be certain things that we couldn't achieve. And we wanted that to be a part of the film itself so that it becomes the charm of the movie. And so we made part 5 and got it done right around the time the pandemic hit, and had an opportunity to go back and do something else, and felt like we could strengthen the case right out of the gates to just go back and make part 1 so that, we had not just 2 films, but, 2 distinctly different films in the way that they look and in the way that we approach them.
yeah, and on that note, I mean, you have one film set in 1994, you have another film set in like 1979. I mean, how difficult is it for you, especially like we're indie filmmakers, and getting like getting the cars alone and some of that feel, we could do creatively, but the cars, the actual set pieces, how much of a challenge was that for you to even pull that off?
So we were fortunate in that Frank Crafts, one of our producers, who is also production designer on both films, along with other people. You know how it is, it's an indie film. So there were multiple people doing multiple jobs, and we shot the movies over 2 periods of principal photography for each one. So it was like a revolving door crew and stuff. But Frank, an antiques collector and dealer, and he's fantastic. He already had, a wealth of things in his store that he was like, okay, we can use this. And he has an eye for especially that 60s, 70s time period. The cars ended up being honestly the easiest thing about it, which looking back on is pretty crazy. We just had a lot of people willing to let us use stuff for very cheap or free. Some of those cars, they just gave us the keys and said, bring it back when you're done. We didn't know these people. It was just a local community here in North Alabama really came together and helped us out. And that was part of why I wanted to do more of an ambitious project, because, the easiest thing to have done would have been to just kind of do sort of like a chamber play type thing where we're just going to be in one primary location. And I've done that type of stuff before, and I really wanted to just challenge myself to see what we could pull off and have as many locations and characters and cars and things like that as we could achieve.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you guys, did both of them so close together and all that, it seems like that community where the exact locations you guys were shooting at, like they were really hyped, on like kind of like the magic of film. And that's kind of like how, indie directors are able to make projects, is sometimes you take it somewhere where people still believe in film. And so,
Yeah.
man, I mean, you should keep riding that wave. Try to do like a goddamn franchise for your next, project.
Yeah, definitely the North Alabama community. They really came together for us, and we couldn't have done it with all the support that we got from just people, like you said, that just believe in the idea of film or kind of chasing that dream. It's not something that they see around here all the time, but the film community here is growing more and more every year, and there are a lot of independent productions being made here. So that's great too, because there's a base of people that you can rely on. But to your point, there's a lot of people who have never seen that and get excited about it and think it's cool to have their Mustang in the film, or they have this house and they'll let you come in, and you know how it is. No one really knows what it's like. For some of those locations that we kind of pop in and be in for like one day, they didn't know really what they were getting into until we're there and doing it.
Yeah, and I would say I guess for us, both you and I are writer directors and have edited our own stuff. You yourself, you edited both of these, correct?
Yeah.
And did you find that just creatively, like this question's really just for me, is like this idea, did you find that challenging working with so many different actors when you know how you're going to edit it, but they may not know? Was that?
Yeah. So we tried to, especially on part one, because we had a little bit more pre-production. I mean, part 5 was so rapid pace. We were just trying to make a movie. There was a lot of thought and planning. We just had the concept and went for it. In part 1, I tried to make sure that each actor or group of actors got some type of reference for the era of film that we were trying to mimic, and that they kind of understood where we were coming from. And at the same time, we kind of do improv jazz. We're figuring out on the day. There's no real planning going into it. Usually we don't have very much time. So especially on part 1, it was just taking, like this old Zoom lens and just figuring it out on the day and then putting it together in post. So it's fun. That's how I know how to make movies, is just go out there and figure it out and, let what happens happen.
Yeah, it's just like going to like a stand-up improv show. It's like you have your set. You're like, yeah, we want to kind of go in this direction, but also, hey, man, whatever happens, happens. So yeah, I totally get that. When it came to both films, they're set in these two unique time periods. How was it kind of working with the composer and getting that score down? Did you find a lot of challenges there, or were you trying to like have a through line with both films with the score?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some thought, because it was reverse engineered. So we did part 5 and scored part 5 first, and we were finishing the score for part 5 as we started scoring part 1. And Kelvin Wooten is our composer, who happens to live here in Athens, Alabama, but he just won a Grammy this year, and he's produced for J. Cole and had a song in Django Unchained. He's done all sorts of different type of stuff, and he scored some stuff for me in the past. And our process is I'm in there in the room with him every day that he works on it. It's not, like horror's not necessarily like his go-to thing, but he can do anything. So I love that process. It's one of the most collaborative processes that, we had through anything that we did on the film, or both films. So it was really magic to watch him work, because I would bring the ideas and the direction. It was much like directing an actor on set. I kind of have, this is what I'm looking for, and then I would just let him go do it. And he's, a genius in my opinion. I just love that guy and what he brings to it. And we wanted to create a couple of pieces of music that would appear in both films, just like you would hear, the Halloween theme recycled into the Halloween sequels, and to kind of have that connective tissue in that sense.
And, there's a lot of like great special effects in the movie. And God, like one of my favorites is, there's a scene with someone wearing a football helmet that is just like so fun. Can you talk a little bit about some of the special effects for both movies, and just kind of how you guys went about that day with the helmet,
The helmet, it's pretty straightforward. That was Marcus Cook, who's done a ton of stuff, and he was on both films. We had a lot of different people chipping in for special effects, and that particular day, we shot like a ton of dialogue stuff in the kitchen, and then we were there like all night at PJ's house, the character of PJ's house. But it's pretty straightforward. We had the dummy head and ripped it off, and it's amazing. Like that and the pizza kill are so simple, but I feel like we got a lot of mileage out of both of those.
Yeah, and you also got a lot of mileage out of the in part one, the scene with the jock tied up against the bed with
part 5 with the toes. Yeah.
Pretty squeamish moment, like a lot of mileage out of that one.
That was a combination of Marcus and a guy named Jeff Shedden, who came in to help Marcus out, and then Marcus had to leave for another project, and Jeff was there when we started that. Like, it's hard for me to remember who did what sometimes, because it was like that, when we started shooting that scene, that was the fall of 2019. And then we came back and did the toes getting chopped off. That was January of 2020.
Wow.
To that point, we had 2 different people playing the killer in part 5. Originally, it was just my friend, like my childhood friend, Andrew Wasserberger, who got the job because he would show up every day for free, and he had the suits, and they fit. He donated that, and we built
the casting
suits around it.
Process is a bit different when it comes to indie horror projects.
Yeah. So that's the story in itself, and how we ended up with Antonio Woodruff filling in for my friend Andrew, because Andrew's wife had a kid, and Antonio was one of 2 actors that I'd met with before we started part 5, because I figured, we might need somebody on a day that Andrew's like, I just can't do it. For the first half of the shoot, Andrew was there every day, but then obviously having a newborn child, he wasn't available when we came back. And Antonio was somebody I felt really good about. And it was, to me, that's the spirit of making movies, and why I love it so much, because Andrew is one of my oldest friends. Antonio was a complete stranger, but from day one that he showed up, it was like he was an old friend. He fit in so perfectly to the vibe that we had. And so when we went back to do part 1, I decided we got to have Antonio in the movie as the killer. And instead of putting him in that mask again, we'll reward him and let him actually get to, show his face and have a little bit more to do.
And man, in part 5, I couldn't tell. Did you guys build a video store, or did you find one?
We found one. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It's only like 10 minutes from here. And we were there for one day, and they let us take control of it and bring in VHS tapes and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, when I saw that, I was kind of like, what? Like where is there a Blockbuster somewhere else other than, like the one in Oregon? Like, yeah, that was great. And man, so in terms of like getting cars and stuff, one of the other big kind of like I would say like calling cards was the hearse. How was it difficult getting that hearse, and was it just kind of the same process? Was that one of the cars?
It became more difficult than I intended. The hearse that we used in part 1, which is like a 60s model hearse, I knew the guy, Trent Thompson, great dude who's helped out on a lot of little films around here. I knew he had that hearse, so I wrote the killer driving in a hearse with that in mind. Like, I can get Trent's hearse. And then when it came time to do it, he was going to be out of state with the hearse. Like, he was taking it to some event or whatever. So we had to find a hearse now, all of a sudden, so it became like this challenge of like, shit, now this one thing we thought we had is sort of like one of the glue pieces. We have to find one. And we found one about 2 hours from where we're located. And it was one of those things where we paid them a little bit of money, and they let us hold on to it for like 2 months and then bring it back a few months later. And then when we made part 1, Trent came through with the original hearse, and we were able to use it, which worked out even better because we needed it to be period specific. And, we couldn't have found a better hearse for part 1 than the one that we used.
Yeah, it's like a classic filmmaking 101 is there someone I could just pay who would just give me this fucking thing for as long as I need it and shut up?
Yeah.
So can you talk about your kind of like maybe inspiration for, kind of some of the backstory of this and how this came about, some of the lore of the story?
Yeah, so I grew up watching slasher movies starting at like 5 or 6 years old, and college football is a big thing in the South, especially in my childhood home. We watched college football and slasher movies. That was kind of how I was raised. So I always wanted to do something that captured both of those elements. And to me, as a kid, some of the lesser sequels in the Friday the 13th or Halloween franchises ended up being the ones that I liked the most. Like as a kid, I just was obsessed over Halloween 5 for whatever reason. I just thought it was super amazing. So I always wanted to do something that kind of honored those films. And specifically for part 5, there's this, I believe it's like late 80s, early 90s zombie film called Flesh Eater. It's directed by Bill Heinzman, I believe is his name. He was the original Cemetery Ghoul and Night of the Living Dead, and then he made his own zombie film where he played that character again. And I find it so charming because it basically just follows him through the whole movie. Not so much, there's no real hero protagonist. Like the characters that are introduced early get killed within the first 25, 30 minutes, and then it just follows him, and he continues to kill all these new random people that you meet for like 5 minutes. So that was kind of in my mind with Parting in part 5, that we would have like these characters that we're following through the whole film, but it's really about just like him going house to house and killing whoever's there and moving on to the next place.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting because especially starting with 5, as I was watching it, I kind of kept thinking like this reminds me of so much stuff, but also, it like I could tell that there was some sort of other inspiration behind it with the big football game. Like there's so many places that I could think of in America where part of the culture is that game every season, and it's just so like it's like mind-boggling a little bit, but also it's like the fact that that's such a big part of American culture is like really fascinating.
Yeah, to me it was always something that I thought about in terms of like Friday the 13th is set on Friday the 13th. Halloween started this whole trend of, and Black Christmas as well, of finding a holiday or an event to set the film around, and it just seems second nature. If you're going to have a slasher movie in Alabama, it has to be based around a big football rivalry because everybody gets together and watches that game, and it is an event.
Right. And so did you grow up in Alabama, or did you kind of come back for this? Okay.
No, I've lived here all my life, and I grew up about 30 minutes from where we shot. And in some cases, we shot in my hometown. There are certain locations like Peter's house in part 5 and the interior of the Hill house in part 1 are both locations in my hometown.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe a good lesson for people watching this to take with them and want to make their own movie is, are there any relationships you have that you could return to, or the people you grew up with, where they're like, oh, I remember Jay. He's that crazy guy who does the film. So, just take over the school, do your murder movie in the school. It's fine. We don't care, So
yeah, definitely. One of those locations, Peter's house in part 5, I've been trying to shoot there for like 5 or 6 years, and it almost done something there a few years ago. It was a friend of mine, Jamie Smith, was living at the house, and it was like in her family. And it just never worked out, but I kept coming back to it because it was such a cool location. And there were like so many elements and rooms in that house that hadn't been touched or updated since the 60s or 70s. So it was always really attractive to me. And thankfully we were able to get them on board for part 5 because it's one of my favorite locations, just because you just show up and it's that way, you don't have to do a whole lot to it.
Yeah, you had a lot of great locations in there. There was the house was great. The cemetery, the video store. I mean, just a lot of those locations. The hospital. I mean, I was really impressed when I saw that hospital. That's a great scene. The end of 5. You had a lot of great stuff in there. So I mean, I guess we've kind of come to that point where this question pops up: what is next
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm really open to anything. I would love to do something completely different that's still, maybe in the horror genre. I'm also open to continuing to make these if we can figure out like the right price point to continue the series. I would love to do it because I think that, once we get it established and hopefully people want to see more of it. But truthfully, like this is something that we just really love making, and those films are near and dear to really the core of the filmmaking team in a lot of ways. And we have a lot of fun doing them, and we know how to do that now. I mean, doing them back to back really was great proof of concept for us, just as filmmakers, to know like what we can do with this amount of money and how we can do it. So I think that we could do more of them and improve upon the things that we're, not thrilled with, and hopefully make bigger and better versions of them.
Yeah, but I think you want to go chase a sitcom first, right? Is that the
Hey, I would love to do pretty much anything at this point. If I can just get something else made, I'd be happy,
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's been a great chatting with you about this. This is a huge endeavor. I mean, most people, it is so hard to do one movie. I mean, it's insane to do one movie. So the fact that you're kind of, we're here talking to you about two films is, like you deserve a big pat on the back. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us. And yeah, we'll look forward to what you're doing next, man.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tom.